Thank you for tuning in to episode 6 of the Enstride podcast. We have done interviews with 2 of the 3 co-founders in the 2 most recent episodes, Nathan Bartels in episode 4 and Alex Bowden in episode 5, and this is the last installment in our Meet the Founder series with me, Justin McQuerry. Alex and Nathan learn about my life and journey with diabetes from diagnosis at a very young age to professional cycling and getting to the UCI World Championships as the first and still only male athlete with type 1 diabetes from the USA to ever represent the nation at an elite championship. If you're finding this podcast interesting or useful, please drop us a like or a follow on any of our social media platforms and check out our website to learn more. On with the episode.
All right, we're back again. And we talked to me and Nathan in the past. So, Justin, you get the hot seat this week. And, to kick it off, you just got done doing something that, it's a little bit different than your normal gravel privateer life.
You know,
You
that's
flew to a criterium.
I did, yeah. At the time of recording this, this is a few days after I got back from Boise, Idaho. Went out to race the Boise Twilight Criterium, one of the biggest and fastest crits in the U.S. road race. I think it's less than a mile course. It's about a minute long, 30 miles an hour average the whole time. And I went out to go race with this team that invited me out that I have a bunch of friends on, and they wanted some help doing lead outs, so I have the fitness and the legs from all the big gravel days to just go sit on the front and put the guys in the right position, and went pretty successfully for us. But pretty, it's man, I being on the front of a massive crit like that with crowds out is an experience in itself, and then being able to do that as the only athlete with type 1 diabetes that was in the race as well, I think that's a cool achievement on 2 facts, and we got to deliver on our goals for the race despite some crashes and misfortune that happened to our team. So I'm definitely not normal gravel privateer at all.
And there's a pretty sweet small video of you dodging a bike flying across the road. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I'm happy I didn't hit that one.
Justin, before we get into your story, since you were the only type 1 diabetic in that race, tell us about your nutrition, your lead up, what you did and how that worked out for you.
Yeah, definitely. So nutrition, as an athlete with diabetes, Nathan's talked about this, Alex has talked about this, preparing for an event is as important, if not more important, than the event nutrition itself. This is a very different event from what I have been doing all year long, as the race was 70 minutes long instead of 7 to 10 hours. So I knew this going in, but thankfully I've done a lot of these bike races in the past, or a lot of this style of bike racing in the past, and I know more or less what my body's going to do, and where to be to be as athletically efficient as possible. So standard high carb breakfast. I think it was oatmeal at the hotel buffet that morning. Went for about a 90-minute ride after breakfast. Just kind of easy spin, move the legs, for me specifically, I usually don't eat any carbohydrates on this ride. Super easy spin, mostly just moving the legs, maybe do a small effort or two, just zone two, not too much effort, but enough to keep the metabolism up, with a higher intensity effort in the evening, and so that I can eat a higher carb meal closer to the event and know that it's not going to have I'll still have an insulin sensitivity spike from the morning activity. So do this 90-minute ride, get back to the hotel. I attempted to take a really long nap, but no, I can't remember if I had lunch first or nap first. I'm pretty sure it was nap and then lunch. Tried to take a nap. Yeah, one or the other. It's same at this point. But took a long nap, or attempted to at least, and then had a nice Chipotle lunch. Easy to predict, just rice, beans, a little bit of salsa, pretty high carb, and I do end up taking a I would say a normal dose of insulin. I'm not like backing off on my insulin for this because, again, with a higher intensity effort, I'm probably not going to be eating a whole bunch prior to the race, and I don't want to have to worry about like overcorrecting and like closer to the event. So I'd rather dose for my food maybe a little bit more aggressively and then have to potentially snack just a little bit closer to the event instead of having a higher blood sugar in the time leading up and then dosing closer to the event and having to deal with like blood sugar and insulin dips and spikes in the immediate time beforehand. And I'm pretty sure I had a cookie like an hour before that took a little bit of insulin, and then we started warming up about an hour, 50 minutes to an hour before the race, rode 30, 40 minutes before the race. Blood sugar was pretty steady. I think I started at like 130 BG, and blood sugar was pretty steady at this time. Race started. We had the first effort in the race for me, first real effort. Like obviously you're following moves, it's a race, like you're riding hard, but like the first effort that I was gonna like put some actual effort into was halfway through this 70-minute race. So the effort started about 25 minutes in. About 15 to 20 minutes in, I took gel, and was just basically just drinking water through this race. So the only calories and carbohydrates they were taking in was from 2 gels during the race. So a total of like 60 grams of carbohydrate. But shorter event, there's a lot of adrenaline that will spike the blood sugar in itself. Had a gel 15, 20 minutes in. I don't remember what my blood sugar topped out at, but I know it didn't see over like 180, 190 during the race. And do this mid-race effort, suffering on the back, trying to recover as they just keep calling preems. And when it all bunches up and slows down again, this was about, I'd say 30 minutes to the finish, 25 minutes to the finish, about when it's going to start. Everyone's going to start thinking about the finale. I take another gel just to make sure my blood sugar is not going to dip in the last couple laps. And then it's pretty much full gas, just focusing on being where I need to be, being where the team needs to be, and following moves, being aggressive and positioning, and really only thinking about that from that point on to the finish. And BG wise, we were actually one of the best crits I've ever had. It was pretty steady throughout, and I'm really happy with that.
A little redemption
What-
from
and-
then.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, so you're not concerned about 150 grams sugar per hour on a 70-minute crit. Yeah, that's probably wise. Yeah, I was just reading Hunter Allen's book that he just put out with training with glucose, or no, I'm training with CGM, and he was talking a lot about sort of glycogen and the glucose system. And it was really interesting because he was talking about how a trained athlete can have 2.5 hours worth of stored glycogen in their system, which I found to be pretty fascinating. I never had actually calculated the hours. And so for like a fast 70-minute crit, you're just like eating goose to just kind of maintain energy balance and just rocking. What are you doing with your insulin delivery? Because you're on a pump, right? So you're doing your basal with fast acting insulin.
Yes, I am.
Tell me a little bit about that, because I'm curious with like the intensity of it.
Yeah, definitely. So this, I would say, from my past experience racing crits, this varies pretty dramatically, both on a couple factors. One, on if it's a single day standalone crit, like the race in Boise, where I didn't have any races in the days leading up. I don't have any races in the days after, which doesn't. I guess the races after don't matter quite as much, but there wasn't any. There weren't any race days in the legs going into this race this weekend. It also depends on how hard the race is. Boise was a pretty flat, fast course, and like while the race itself was difficult at times, it wasn't like one of the races that has a massive hill in it or is super technical where you're just like full gas from the gun just to like stay in the wheel, stay in position. There was a lot of grouping and bunching up, so you got time to recover, and you weren't like, there were times during this race where you were expending zero energy, so it was less of a consistent burn on the on the glycogen stores on the blood sugar than some other races. And based on that, based on my lead up to the race, like if I was able to nail the nutrition in the couple hours before, is going to determine on if I'm keeping the pump plugged in, normal basal delivery, or if I'm taking it off and like kind of tweaking with it a little bit. And for the race this weekend, it was in the whole time doing full my normal basal rate up until I would say the last 20 minutes, and then I unplugged it in the last 20 minutes just to kind of confirm that we weren't going to bottom out anywhere, and that was it.
When you said your normal, oh, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, it's I think it's super interesting, right? Because in these long endurance races like Unbound or Sea Otter or Leadville or whatever, right? Like you're at, all you can really do is ride it, whatever your pace is, and it kind of has to be consistent the whole time. So you're like, you have that energy expenditure so it's interesting to kind of look at the data and go, yeah, when it's just like these high intensity efforts, but only for so long, like 70 minutes. I mean, how often do you go on only a 70-minute training ride, right? Like preparing for these races, it's significantly longer. So by the time the blood sugar actually, like the insulin actually becomes impactful, the race is done.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just like, think about that.
Yep. Well, there's that intensity factor as well. These crits are, especially at the level Justin's racing at that pro level, they're intense. And he said this one wasn't full gas the whole way because it was relatively a flat course, and he seemed to have some opportunity to rest, but the intensity is still really high, and that kind of produces the cortisol response, and it's an intensity and a duration that you do keep the insulin pumping. It was pretty interesting. So when you said normal basal rate, did you cut it back for like a normal exercise basal rate, or just normal every day, just Justin cruising through basal rate?
Just normal everyday Justin cruising through basal rate. I have steered. In the past, I used to do exercise basal rates and like cut it down to like 50, 70, 30%, whatever. And I've found in practice, it has been easier for me to do this manually by plugging and unplugging my pump. Since I'm using a corded pump, I'm not using an Omnipod or anything where I don't have the ability to disconnect it. I've only used corded pumps in my past, so this has just been a strategy from day one. If I'm in an exercise block, whether it's training, racing, whatever, it has just been easier for me to manage blood sugar, even on a loop system, by manually plugging or unplugging the pump from the site on my butt. It's pretty easy to access through the spandex, so I don't have any issue with that. And that way I can either know I'm getting my whatever my basal rate is or no insulin at all.
Does that throw it off later? Like, I know from my looping, right? Like it has to take into calculate the insulin on board as a calculation. So if you unplug it, you're technically still getting insulin, maybe to a degree. So do you find that it like alters how it works later for you?
I'm sure it does. And this is something that I bet my doctors and diabetes educators and everyone that is telling me like the things that I should be doing is like, Justin, what are you doing? This is the exact opposite of what the algorithm's for. But for the exercise, I found that it really does not make a difference, because as the longer you exercise, the higher your insulin sensitivity gets. So it's with the insulin on board, like if it's correcting for anything while I have it unplugged, that isn't necessarily going to mean as much, because when I plug it back in, my insulin sensitivity will be higher. And even if it's just going back to the normal basal rate and not giving additional correction, that normal amount of insulin, normal, quote unquote, will be more than enough to handle whatever is happening. I would say after the event is probably where more of the tumultuousness of the BG comes in, but I'm also paying attention to my blood sugar much more at that point, and like I have the ability to because I'm not actually racing, and then I can like actually see that my blood sugar is going up and like give the amount of insulin that I think I need at that time.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's really good information. Yeah, it's so cool to hear how you manage that. It like really kind of lines up, but then it's also maybe counterintuitive to what we've all been taught as type 1 diabetics, and how we're supposed to manage insulin pumps when exercising and racing at an elite level. But if you actually dig into the research a little bit, it makes total sense of why you do it that way. So that's cool to hear. And so for all the listeners, just dig into what's happening with the intensity and the what Justin's doing. So let's get to your story, Justin. Where are you from, man? Let's hear about your story.
Yeah, the meat and bones of who Justin is. I was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 2 years old. So type 1 diabetes is the only thing, I don't want to say the only thing I know, but I have not ever known life without diabetes, which might be sad in some cases, but for me, it's like, yeah, this is who I am. This is normal. Like I've never had to like uh, deal with the identity crisis of like, oh, I'm changing who I am because I'm now diagnosed with diabetes, because that happened really before I had like real consciousness or like any solid memories, which is for me has worked out pretty dang well, I would say. But I was born in Washington State, moved to Texas when I was young, before I can remember again. But my family on my dad's side's from California, family on my mom's side's from Europe. So outside of school, spent a lot of time traveling and got to see a lot of the US and a lot of the world from a pretty young age, and I don't really want to say I'm from anywhere in particular, just because like home is wherever I am, and have a bed, and have a roof over my head. So it's kind of a cool thing to like wrap my head around, and it fits right in line with the whole bike racing career path that I've been following, basically since I started pursuing this as a sport as well. But yeah, was diagnosed with diabetes when I was 2 years old. I don't know much about the diagnosis story. I think my parents were telling me I was getting super sick, like peeing all the time, like the classic diabetes symptoms, like losing weight, peeing all the time, drinking all the water, drinking milk. I don't know if either of you guys noticed this, but for me, when my blood sugar is super high, the only thing that can quench my thirst is like whole milk. It's I don't know what the reason for this is, but it's been like this since I can remember, and still is current. And it's not something I actively drink, but it is what it is.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What's crazy about that, Justin, is when I was getting, before I was diagnosed, right before, like when I was having the thirst hit me. Milk, man. I would pound glasses of milk. I don't know what. That's really interesting. I'm gonna go dig into that. I thought that was just me, but that's funny that's something you experience too. I don't get that anymore, but I think it's just because I don't drink milk at all. Just like not even a thing I think about to drink. So I don't have that craving anymore. But I do remember when I was right before I was diagnosed, I was drinking a ton of milk as well. So kind of wild.
Yeah, that is
insane, because that's never been a thing that is like even crossed my mind. And like I do drink milk. I mean, not like a lot, but weird. I'm a big fan of Crystal Light. I'll put down an entire pitcher of Crystal Light when my blood sugars are high, and then go make more and continue to drink it. But
I've had a lot of that growing up too.
It's like, for me, it's like milk when you're high, and peanut butter when you're low. It just makes no sense and whatsoever.
It's just one of those things. It's So diagnosed when I was super young, and it's kind of crazy because like the first real memory I have, just in life in general, I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. I can't remember, and I took insulin for dinner, like right before dinner, and for whatever reason, I had a little hissy fit, temper tantrum, stormed off to my room without eating. And I vividly remember crawling into the kitchen sometime later because my blood sugar was tanking, and I just like, when your like blood sugar's tanking, you have no dexterity. Your like your brain is still working, but you lose function of your motor skills. And I remember just like dragging my face on the carpet into the kitchen, and there was a glass of orange juice and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich there. And I like just shoved them in my face, like trying to like get back to feeling like a real person and getting a lesson that I was like, yeah, like you can't do this because you have this thing where if you don't take care of yourself, it doesn't matter. Like you have to do these certain things just to maintain your normal day to day. And you can do whatever you want with that. But if you don't do that, you're going to have limitations on what you can do. And it was like, oh, like it kind of hit me at that point when I was 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, like first gaining consciousness that this is who I am. And it's kind of cool because I've been able to like see the world as like there hasn't been a limitation on any single thing I can do because I have diabetes. And from a very young age, I wanted to do like the coolest thing in the world, and I thought being an athlete was the coolest thing in the world. Like they may have not been the most educated, they may have not been the most like come from like super wealthy families, come from like any area of major importance, but if they were excelling in the sport, they had some notoriety in some way or fashion. I was like, that's what I want to do. It doesn't matter if I have diabetes. That's what I'm going to do. And it just so worked out that like I got into cycling and whatnot. But yeah, like I think my diagnosis and diabetes story is, I don't know if it's how unique it is, but I can imagine it's not the most common, especially being diagnosed super young and then like having this like real like come to consciousness where it's like, oh, I know I'm a person now, and I know I have diabetes at the same time. And it's like, okay, this is the world I live in, so got to do it.
I'm curious about this story. I want to dig into it a little bit more. So you were 6 and you had this life experience where you like all of a sudden you wake up and you realize like, oh wow, I have to like really pay attention to this diabetes thing. If I take insulin, then I have to follow with food, and there's this balance that I have to maintain. But if I strike this balance, I can do anything. I'm curious about like the agency that you were given at that age. Were you pretty much able to just kind of take the insulin, eat the food kind of on your own, or were your parents like involved kind of micromanaging it as well? Or I guess what did that look like? Because that story kind of sounds like you had a lot of agency in your diabetes management at a pretty young age. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I would say, and I say 6, this could be anywhere from like age 4 to age 7. That is beyond me. But age 6 sounds like a nice round number. So I would say it was a lot of co-management. I definitely was not doing, like at this super young age, I was not doing everything myself. At this point, it was what, like early 2000s, so I was still like doing finger sticks. CGMs were not even a thing that existed in my world, in small town Texas, and was still doing manual injections with long acting insulin. And I think it was fast acting insulin. I don't even think it was rapid acting insulin at that time. Um, and there was a lot of, my parents were very involved, and they honestly, I think a lot of the way I look at diabetes today is a result of the way they helped me learn how to manage it. And it was extremely hands-on, as in we were weighing every ounce of food I was having like to the ground, like getting a scale out, like what I think a lot of what we have done as athletes to like manage calories and carbs and fats and proteins and whatnot. But we were doing that since I was like a very, very young kid, to count carbohydrates and then making our insulin dosing decisions based on that. And then like putting that into account with activity that was going on as well. And really paying attention to everything, because it was apparent from very young that everything has an effect on what your blood sugar does and what your diabetes does, whether it's food, activity, stress, whatnot. We were really paying attention to everything, checking I don't even know how many times a day. I know, like, you guys were talking about the test strips littered in the van when you guys were doing Race Across America. But that sounds like my entire childhood, of like every car I ever was in, every house I was ever in, every hotel room, like just test strips everywhere, because we were testing all the time, like doing 10, 15 tests a day, a lot of times, just to like see where you're at, and like get that idea of like where the blood sugar was trending, because it was apparent that that was actually a thing. I remember both my mom and my dad would wake up at 2 a.m. every night, like wake me up so I could check my blood sugar and see where it was at. And like it was, yeah, we were both. It was they were definitely more involved than I was earlier in my life, because I think they still realized I was a young kid and probably didn't have like a total grasp on it, even if like in my mind at this point it is something I did have a grasp on. Um, so they were doing, I'd say, the bulk of the work, but it was very apparent to me that there was work involved and everything mattered. And since I've been doing that for so many years, it's just a normal part of day to day, or it became a normal part of my day to day. Like the older I got, and I can't remember what age it was when I first started doing it, but it was probably like elementary or middle school sometime. Like going to the nurse's office, test my blood sugar in front of her, taking the insulin in front of the nurse. Like, and I remember, I can't even remember what grade this was, but the nurse was saying, "Yeah, you don't even need to come here. I'm just doing this to check a box," because like I was on top of it and I was like taking care of myself, but there needed to be someone there to make sure it was happening, because I was still, what, 10, 8, 9, 10. I don't know ages very well in grade school, but yeah, it was apparent that everything mattered, and that's just the way it was.
Well, here's a really important question.
Yeah.
You checked your blood sugars a whole lot. How often did you change your Lancet?
So that is a good question.
It's actually not a very serious question, but
it's I think when I was like, when I started doing the majority of it, the Lancet changes definitely decreased in frequency. It was, I remember a lot of really, really dull ones with the Lancet dialed all the way up to the deepest setting just so you could get something. But I also remember testing my blood sugar so many times that if I think it was like my ring finger or my pinky finger, like if I just squeezed it hard enough, sometimes like whatever the most recent check was, like would still be there, and like you usually get enough blood to like get a reading.
Yeah, I think most people that have lived with diabetes before the CTM days can probably relate. Like, if I was on about a once a year-ish Lancet change, that seems about reasonable.
Yeah. I may have
unless I like accidentally like stuck it into the countertop or something,
done that.
I feel like this is pretty gross conversation, but I'm thinking, so I don't test my blood sugars very often anymore with like finger, like with test strips. But the Lancet I've been running is multiple years old at this point. Like, I cannot remember the last time. And you know what's bad about it, Alex, is I have one of those little Lancet guns that like there's like 5 of them in a disc. It's all you have to do is click it. And I actually have a bunch of those discs too. And so it's just one of those things where,
and they're all expired, aren't they?
It's so disgusting. Do those expire? Why does everything have to expire?
Technically,
a Lancet disc shouldn't expire. Come on.
They do, but as far as I'm concerned, as long as it stabs your finger and makes you bleed. Hey, I will say my Lancet was changed within the last 2 times I've checked my blood sugar, and only because we were checking my kid's blood sugar just out of general curiosity. So therefore, it actually got changed 3 times in the last few months.
Nice.
No, not because I actually care, but only because I didn't feel like sharing it with my kid.
Now that you say that, Alex, I think I might have lied, because sometimes I will test my wife's blood sugar, and for whatever reason, it just feels better to put a fresh needle in the Lancet, a fresh Lancet in the gun before.
It feels a little less gross.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah. And I check my wife's blood sugar just because it's fun. have little competitions. Like to
Like it.
like to see where the like to see where the non-diabetics are in my world.
I feel like you're in a losing battle if you're trying to compare your blood sugar to hers. I mean, but
Hey, you never know.
whatever works.
Yeah, yeah. Every once in a while I get a win, but not very often.
Yeah, I remember my dad checking his blood sugar every now and then as well, and like showing it to me. Like we would compare my blood sugar to my dad's blood sugar, and it was always fascinating to me, just to like realize that like people without diabetes also had a blood sugar, which is again from a very young age. Like my reality was my reality was my own, and like I didn't like grasp the concept of like other people living different lives, and it just fascinating to me, and was I think also like helped that, plus the way I grew up with diabetes like helped spark this curiosity and desire to like be as loud and transparent about me and my life with diabetes and what I was doing, because I could only imagine that there was at least one other person out there that went through something similar and did not have the either access to education, the awareness, whatever, to like have the mindset of like, yeah, if as long as you take care of this, as long as you know what you're doing, like as long as you know that you have to do these certain things and like just make sure everything is like in line and in stride, pun intended, you could do whatever, and you didn't have to limit yourself. And that was like that leads into my cycling career, and now within Stride, what we're doing here, and it's yeah, it's I think all part of it, and all part of me.
So what's interesting, and I think we need to chat about the cycling career sooner rather than later. But like you've kind of tangentially hit on a thing that I know I experienced, but like, and that is having to grow up way faster just because of diabetes. Like Nathan, maybe you're kind of in the same boat, right? But like, it's kind of cool. I'm curious on your experience, Justin. Like I know for me, I had to learn at a young age, like how to problem solve through things and how to like think through like things that are going to happen in the future, right? Because you can't just like go have a milkshake and then be like, well, I'm just going to deal with it later, right? You have to like think about like consequences that are going to happen if you make some decision, which is kind of forced me to mature a lot faster. I mean, I still probably, if you ask anybody, like, yeah, Alex, mature, what are you talking about? But in some senses, right? You like grow up, mature, things like that. Like I'm curious to your experience, especially because you got diagnosed super young.
Yeah, I agree full heartedly with that, and I think especially being diagnosed so young, I think it was just a necessity of the life I had, was that if I could mature and like deal with this and do whatever I wanted, or I could not, and then like live with the consequences of having to deal with like having the mindset of where you have to deal with diabetes, instead of having the mindset of where dealing with diabetes or managing your diabetes could lead to whatever you wanted it to be. And I think thankfully, with the way I grew up with diabetes, what my parents were saying, what like the doctors that we had at the time were telling me and like helping educate both me and my parents, it was able to like foster this mindset of like, yeah, thinking ahead, thinking forward. And as long as you're doing the steps and like managing and being cognizant of what's happening, like you can plan for whatever, you can do whatever, you can eat whatever. Like you don't have to limit yourself, and that for me that's awesome, because like I got to that, plus like all the travel I did for family stuff, and like just being like I'd say relatively worldly from a pretty young age. It was like, oh yeah, I can do literally anything, anywhere in the world, do anything. Doesn't matter if I have diabetes, and that in itself I think is cool. But it also allowed me to have this like kind of shift in perception of like, well, if I can do this, then everyone else can do this. But I have had the opportunity through bike racing and through just like kind of not being shy about diabetes to see that there are a lot of other people that are living with diabetes, or a lot of other people that have people in their lives who have diabetes that do not have this mindset. And that when I first started realizing that, I was like, I don't want to, I want to make sure everyone in the world with type 1 diabetes, or maybe not type 1 diabetes, just diabetes in general, doesn't have to have this like box on what they think their life has to be just because they're unaware of like the right steps or the right mindset to have about it.
So one of the things, Justin, that I'm hearing, especially when you were a kid and your parents were kind of helping you kind of get a handle on how to approach type 1 diabetes, it sounds like you were testing just all the time. You were already kind of tuned into the fact that you have to be aware of trends. And also the thing you said is that you realize at a very young age that there's all sorts of different factors that affect the blood sugar, from food to stress to sleep to exercise, and all of these things are part of it. And but what's interesting is with, you know, this kind of approach of like testing all the time, always paying attention to it, it sounds like it could just become overwhelming. But what I kind of heard from you and your parents is that it was almost more of a sense of just being very much engaged and very curious. Would you say that was kind of the approach over like being like kind of more like stressed out and concerned, but more in the line of like, I'm just very curious to see what's going to happen. I'm very, you know, you want to be very much engaged in the process. You know, I have a high, well, what happened?
Yep.
You know, and then that kind of led down the road to where you then acquire all that knowledge of all the factors and how your body responds in all the different situations. And then I guess my this is a leading question, but do you feel as though like diabetes started to become it's kind of slip more into the background of life once, you know, you started off just being incredibly curious, learning all the things, and then it kind of seems to me when I talk to you like diabetes just kind of runs on autopilot in the background at this point.
Yep, 100. I agree with the curiosity aspect. I think a better way of categorizing that, and this kind of goes back into what Alex was saying, it was more so being proactive instead of reactive, just with diabetes. And then because of that, and because that is such a big part of my life, with life in general. And if I was proactive and like just doing like these steps of testing my blood sugar all the time, measuring my food, being aware of like all these little things that are going on, if I'm aware of them all the time, I don't need to be reacting to like these major things because I just forgot about like the fact that I have diabetes and I ate dinner and now my blood sugar is 8,000 or whatever, and I have to deal with the consequences of that. It's like understanding that, okay, yes, this is the life I have, and like there are steps you have to do because of that. But if you're doing those steps and like thinking about it ahead of time, like doing things that you have to do, like I mean, there are things you have to do with diabetes, even though I like to have this mindset of the world is your oyster and you don't have to limit yourself. There are still certain things you have to do. Being proactive about that and just like always being aware, to me, it just kind of all fell away. And like, I know it is something I am dealing with every day. And like, there are a lot of things I have to do, like however many hundred decisions it's said that people with diabetes have to make every day. Like I mean, we're all making them every day, but I just don't think about them anymore because it's the way I approach it. It's do this and then you can do whatever. And I like that. I like that doing whatever thing because that's fun.
Well, it seems like it's kind of a common theme from, well, just about every single conversation I think we've had, but definitely through these like little interviews, right? Is a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of experimentation, a little bit of like retrospective on I did this and then this happened. You know, was that good, bad, or indifferent? Do that over and over again with kind of a goal in mind of I want to reach this objective. And then suddenly, you know, it does fall into the background, right? Like, yeah, you don't really think about the fact that you have to give yourself insulin for dinner or, you know, check your blood sugars a little bit after if you're like, you know, like for in my case, right? Like I'm using the looping system. So I don't really give myself insulin, but I still kind of just know, hey, I ate dinner a little while ago. I should check, right? And like, do I need to do it? But like, you know, it's not like a thing that's like I'm not worried about it as I'm eating dinner, thinking about like in 2 hours I need to check my blood sugar. And I think it's cool that we've all had similar experiences there, right? Because it to me shows the power of that mindset of being like, you know what, we've got it. Let's figure out if I do X, what happens, and then can I adjust X if it's not right, or I learn what conditions it works in, when it doesn't work in. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a pretty powerful realization through these conversations.
No, I agree 100%. I think that mindset is something we all share, right? And that's why we're all here and why we want to bring this mindset and make it as loud and apparent as possible, because it's allowed us to live pretty incredible lives just for people in general, let alone people living with diabetes. And I think if we can make one person realize this, then we can potentially make two. And if we can make two, then I think that's the world right there. Like being able to share this ability to do whatever you want to do, whether you're living with diabetes or not, is incredibly powerful and something I'm passionate about. And I think something both of you guys are passionate about. And yeah, that's in stride right there.
All right, let's hear about how you got into bike racing, Justin.
All right, bike racing now, finally. So actually, I got into cycling pretty young. Grew up small town Texas. Really, the only sports that really mattered, baseball and football. I don't really have the body type or desire to play either of those sports. Um, I started riding bikes when I was I mean, like, rode bikes ever since I was a little kid. Like, I know there's like little tiny baby photos of me on like tricycles and like on bicycles. And I believe I was like 8 or 9 or 10. And I started mountain biking with my dad. That was fun because like you get to explore, you get to go out in nature. You're like seeing more than if you're going on a walk or a run. You're going a little bit faster. And then we started riding with the local club in Waco, Texas, where I grew up just south of Waco. Waco was the biggest, closest big town, and club was super inviting. I owe a lot of my desire to pursue cycling just as a sport in general, or like as a lifestyle and a sport in general, to the Waco Bicycle Club and the people that got me into the sport. Because they were very adamant about having fun on the bike, and then if you wanted to compete, do that. But like, it doesn't matter how well you do, like how fast you are. Obviously, I want to be fast, but if you're not enjoying it, then why are you doing it? And I like really fell in love with it from day one. So started doing some mountain bike races when I was 10, 11, 12 or something. We have a really good local series here in Texas in both the spring and the fall. Did a handful of like the super young races. I can't remember what they were. And I think it was when I was 13. I remember this pretty vividly. I was like, all right, this year I'm going to actually train. I want to do well in racing and I'm going to prepare. And like, it was the first day out training in January. I was riding with one of my friends. It was actually on Martin Luther King Day, January 2010, 11, 12, something like that. Um, I went out mountain biking. My front brake was making noise, and I knew enough about bike mechanics to like know how to like back off the brake pads so that they wouldn't make noise. Turns out I did enough to where the brake wouldn't actually like grab anything, and I ended up crashing and hitting a tree and tearing my rotator cuff, or like four of the five rotator cuff muscles in my right arm, and that took surgery, long time to rehab. Um, Not really an injury 13-year-olds get, so it was pretty bizarre. And I was like, all right, this is bikes are not going to take me out this easily, even if I did it to myself. And the doctor was like, all right, you cannot get back on a mountain bike. So I got on a road bike, and I think I did a time trial when I was either 13 or 14. I think I got second. There may have been like three people that showed up, but I got on podium and I was like, oh, this is cool. I started pursuing road racing, and we had a pretty good local series here in Texas. Did well enough, started moving up through the categories. When I was 17, I went to Europe for the first time to go race, and I think it was like a month of Kermesse racing in Belgium, and was like, this is this is the coolest thing in the world. I 100% want to do this, so I'm going to do everything I can to make bike racing my future. And I believe it was the next year at nationals when I was 18. Maybe it was 20 when I was 7. I think it was when I was 17. I went to nationals that year, and I met the director for, at the time, Team Type 1, which was becoming Team Novo Nordisk the next year. We stayed in contact. I raced, I think, the Junior Tour of Ireland when I was 18, with Team Novo Nordisk and a couple of their other junior riders. And then right out of high school, I started racing for the development team. And basically from there, it's been bikes ever since. Raced for the development team for 4 years. Thought I was going to go pro when I was 21. Didn't get the contract, and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go do my own thing. Race for a domestic team in Texas. Got to experience a bunch of really cool big races across the U.S. And then the following year, I was signed by Team Skyline Continental team. Their first year being a Continental team, and I thought that was like, when I was growing up, Continental teams were pro, and I was like, all right, 22, I'm pro. This is exactly what I wanted my life to be. Turns out it's really freaking hard, and you do a lot of work on the bike, off the bike, a lot of travel just to get your head kicked in. But it's the dream. You get to travel, go across the U.S., go across the world, do some really big races in Europe with Skyline, and then COVID hit. Was like, all right, this is a reset year. I'm gonna like train super hard, get back into it when the racing comes back up, which I thought was gonna be 2020, ended up being 2021. I think we did some Swift racing in 2020, but 2021 we did a pretty big crit series, or pretty big crit focus with Skyline, and did really well. Won a handful of races, got to ride lead out for some really good sprinters, and like really had a good time racing. But throughout that year, I was in contact with Team Novo Nordisk again, as the development team went Continental, and they were getting into a lot of really cool lower level races in Europe. And I was like, well, I'm doing all right in the U.S., but my dream's to race in Europe. So ended up talking with them, got a spot on their team for 22, and moved to Europe in January 2022. Was there for like 5-6 months. Did all right, got in a couple breakaways, did some crits or kermesses in the Netherlands, did all right there. You know, keep thinking I'm gonna get that pro contract, but it's, for whatever reason, it just ended up not working out. And then in 2023, gravel started becoming a thing, and I started putting a little bit more focus on that. Went to World Championships at the end of the year for the U.S. as the first and only male athlete with type 1 diabetes on a U.S. national team, which I thought was pretty dang sick. And then in 2024, I was still racing on the road for Novo, but had my own little gravel campaign on the side. And then partway through the year, I realized that gravel was kind of the direction I really needed to focus on, because those were the races I enjoyed the most, the races I was having the most success in, and if I'm going to World Championships for gravel, it seems like that's probably something I have a little bit more of a knack at than road, track, anything else. So kind of threw all my eggs in that basket, and mid 2024 quit the road officially, unofficially. There might be a little bit of a comeback, but since then,
I mean, you were just at Boise like 3 days ago.
True.
Which that's a check. It was a road.
Yeah, true. It is. Gravel's still the main focus.
That's just because crit racing is so much fun. You got to jump in there every once in a while. Man, I don't know
if I could possibly do another crit. Well, but then again, I probably broke a lot more bones in crits than you have.
I was going to say, didn't you break a jaw on a crit? That probably would make me hesitant as well.
Yeah, it still cracks on a morningly basis.
Probably still hurts a little bit. Man, right. I love the platform of gravel racing, just as a as a visual for an athlete with type 1 diabetes, because a lot of times, I mean, they're individual sports. First, it's an individual event for the most part. The races are long and they're just grueling. And there's this like element of just kind of being out on your own. And so it's a really cool picture of just like being out there, managing your insulin needs, your sugar needs, and then just the absolute like grueling event itself. So just super inspiring platform to be pursuing with type 1 diabetes. Super fun to watch.
I agree full-heartedly, and that's the reason I have kept in cycling as long as I have. It's with the ability to travel. It's also the ability to meet people with diabetes in all corners of the U.S. and the world and show them what I'm doing, racing at an elite level. And then, like you're saying, in gravel, it's this getting through these races is an achievement in itself. And getting through these races while managing type 1 diabetes is also noteworthy. And then doing this in whatever the highest level caliber of field, the pro field, the elite field, the open field, whatever we want to call it, is, I think that's something that I'm able to like use my platform as an athlete with type 1 diabetes and show people that are also living with type 1 diabetes that it's like, yeah, you can, as long as you're taking care of the day to day, you're doing these things, like you're acting proactively and not reacting, and like living within this closed box. It's the world's your oyster, and that's something that I want to keep pushing as long as I can.
I think it's cool too, right? Like you said, finishing these races is an achievement in and of itself, and we talk about diabetes, and yes, there's extra things that we have to do, but as we've talked about, right, it's like it's kind of just the way that life is. But at least in my experience, what's really like extra cool, and I'm sure you've had this experience times 1,000, right, is I'll be in a race or I'll finish a race and like they'll see me like somebody will see me give insulin or whatever it is, and like somehow the conversation of diabetes comes up and it's like, oh, you did Unbound and you have diabetes? And you're like, yeah, but let me explain to you why it's actually like better, right? Like how I can use this data and this analysis and these tools and like this mindset. And I just think it's like really cool, especially as we've kind of said, we're changing that narrative around what it means to have type 1 and like what you can possibly do with it. Like I at least as far as I've seen it, right? Like that's excuse me, a really interesting way to like share that message. Is it's like more so people that are just shocked that you can do it, and you're like, well, yeah, but it's not that big of a deal. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
that's my experience. I'm sure you've had similar.
No, I agree full-heartedly. Yeah, it's like, to me, just like you said, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. It's a part of my life. I do what I have to do, and then I can do whatever because of that. And it's that mindset that we want to change the narrative around type 1 with. And I think we've all done it through sport. Now we're doing it through InStride. Love it.
Well, I just love how, we kind of jokingly say like we have the advantage. It's like, oh yeah, we can do this because we have the advantage. And it's so funny because like then all of a sudden all these athletes started, these non-type 1 diabetic athletes started using CGMs, and they're finding these just like vast improvements over like how they should manage their nutrition, what they should eat, how much, when, all these things that they're learning from CGM. And it's like, oh wait, maybe we did have an advantage because we've been using these, literally 15 years prior to any non-type 1 getting their hands on these. And then I was reading Hunter's book on training with CGM, and he's kind of breaking down the systems, and he's talking about insulin. And he, again, this book's written to the non-type 1 athlete who's using CGM, which is a brilliant book so far. I'm loving it. But one of the things he talks about is he breaks down insulin and how insulin is working in the system. And he goes, it would be, right now we don't have a continuous insulin monitor, but it would be really great if we did. And I'm like, Well, I do. It's called an insulin pump. Like, again, I do have an advantage because I do have this gauge of exactly how much insulin I'm putting into my system, how much sugar I'm putting into my system. It's like, exactly, as an athlete, especially, like, all the components that go to creating energy for the success. All the ingredients that go into creating recovery. It's like, and you have complete control over it. And it's just like such a cool thing to like see, it's like, it's something you kind of like intuitively in your gut already knew that, like, wait a second, I think I have a bit of an advantage because I have like control over all these things that are just vital to the success of an athlete. And then you start to see little things bubble up to the surface in these like training books and these manuals where it's like, oh, it'd be so cool if we had constant insulin monitors. And it's like, I have one. I've been using one forever. It's called an insulin pump. Pretty cool. And so I don't know. I see stuff like that and I just love it because it's like, oh man, as a type 1, we have so much control over the system. And I won't bring up my little analogy, but it's so cool to have like complete control over all the little elements. And again, it's just being engaged and like learning from the mistakes and all the factors that affect the system.
Yep.
So it's funny. You're saying like, oh, we got to monitor our insulin, right? It's like, well, we have that literally on display, like how much insulin you have on board. Today, I was actually thinking of like, hell, what more do we really need? And I was like, what would be great would be like this like way to track the carbs in our system. I was like, started to think about that. I'm like, wait a minute, we do have that. Like that's literally a CGM. It's just like, it's not telling us like our metabolic rate and things like that, but like that's what a non-diabetic has, right? It's like if their blood sugar starts to go up, we see our blood sugars go up, and then it reacts with insulin. It's like, and so we do have so many of these tools available. I don't know. It's just, I think that I am like a bit in awe a little bit just because even when we first started, with our cycling stuff, Nathan, way back in the day, that's when they were still just testing these things. And before that, it was like, we just didn't have this data. And now I'm like, man, we have literally everything we need to just let these systems control all the things. And I don't know, it's cool. And I'm excited to see like what more we can bring about.
Yep. No, it's incredible with the technology we have now. Like we're saying, it's having diabetes in 2025 today. Like I'm comparing to even, okay, maybe not 5 years ago, but 10 years ago, like before I was really on CGMs full time, it's a night and day difference in just daily life. But we're also combining that with the way we think about it, the three of us specifically, and that approach there is something that I do not think is, from what I've seen, just through traveling, racing, meeting other people with diabetes, just talking, hearing about it, is not an overwhelmingly common mindset. And that approach is because we're utilizing the technology, not we're using it the way it's designed, but we're also like, we're trying to find all the tips and like all the neat little hacks and tricks to like do exactly what we want with it and not thinking inside the box. Like everything we have done to get to where we're at right now, like the three of us sitting here, is because we've had this mindset and approach to think outside the box and like get to the end goal by whatever means necessary, whatever that means. Like if that means I'm plugging and unplugging my pump during a race because I want to like manually control how much insulin I have like being delivered at any given time, I'm going to do that. Even if someone's telling me that's a bad idea, I'm still going to do that because I know what that's going to do to my body, and it's me living with diabetes at the end of the day. And like, I have my own goals for what I'm going to do, and as long as I'm like acting proactively with that and not doing it recklessly, not being silly, not being stupid, not like taking insulin and then not eating dinner or like doing a move and then forgetting to eat, like not doing something just obscene, like you can really use it to your advantage, and that's incredibly impactful.
Yeah, we'll dig into this in the future podcasts because it gets kind of there's a lot of meat on this bone, but there's some really cool research, and I've talked to you guys about this, and I'm just super fascinated by it. and we will definitely unpack it. But it's this, research that's coming out of the Stanford lab about, a mindset approach to, do you view stress as an enhancing situation or a debilitating situation? And, everything you're talking about, Justin and Alex, the way you've approached your disease, and, the way I've been kind of just, half believing in my own comment of like, oh yeah, I got the advantage, but it turns out to be actually true, is this like stress is enhancing, the stress being diabetes, and that thing is actually fuel for our success. And the way your body responds with that kind of mindset is actually different than it responds if you have a stress is debilitating mindset. So that would be, oh, I have this diabetes and it's, it's going to make me so I can't race at the elite level, or, oh, poor me, I've got diabetes, so, life sucks. And your body actually has a different physiological response. And, this is kind of one of the elements that we want to unpack here, because, one of the things that I've been on this 20-year curiosity mission of trying to identify like all these people that I've been surrounded with that are elite athletes. It's like, what's the through line? What's the thing that makes them successful? And I know what it's not. And what it's not is a specific way they deliver insulin, a specific nutrition plan for exercise, a specific, recovery plan for exercise. Are they on pins? Are they on, pumps? Are they on Lantus? Are they on, just basal rapid insulin? And there's no, everybody's doing a little different, but still finding success. And the thing that is the same amongst everybody from Justin to Alex to, all the other teammates that I've had racing at the elite level, at the Olympic level, it's this stress is enhancing mindset. It's like, how do I take this thing, this like thing that's a total bummer? You get handed a diagnosis, and how do I use that as fuel to get me closer to this goal that I have? And that's that stress is enhancing mindset. Like I said, it's backed by some pretty exciting research, and we'll definitely unpack that in future podcasts, because it's pretty freaking awesome.
I'm excited to dive into that even further. I know that's obviously why we're all here right now, and there's a lot to go there for sure.
It's really cool, and this is related, but also going to take a lot of time to unpack as well, is like, Nathan, your stress is enhancing is really helpful and really cool. And that really speaks to me.
Hold on. It is not mine. So that stress is enhancing comes out of, her name's Aaliyah Crum out of Stanford. That I stole that from her. It's definitely not my language.
Well,
thanks for the credit. Okay. Anyways, I just came across her. Go on.
You're the one that keeps bringing it up to us and reminding us how valuable that is. So you get the credit for that at least. But I think it's going to be really interesting to unpack a little bit more in the future too. How many different variables come into play in this that go beyond just like you, me, Justin, whoever as an individual? Like I saw like, I think it was a post on like the diabetes subreddit today, like one of them, and it's all about, going to the endo. And one of the top comments was like, yeah, I actively think my endo is a hindrance to my diabetes care, and I go as often as insurance requires me to get a refill on my prescription. And so, like, it's kind of interesting to unpack that as well, even beyond just like how they approach, their type 1, because we're all kind of products of the society that we're in, and, the narratives that surround it. And, I think there's probably a lot that we can like work out with. Okay, cool. You obviously have to take it upon yourself to like shift that mindset, but, what else needs to change in this whole world as well? Like, what can these practitioners do for us that actually like help encourage us to, get to where we want to go? I don't know. It's just kind of interesting to think about how many factors kind of come into play here.
There's a lot, and it's something that, again, brings us all together with that shared insight, and why we're all here with InStride to bring that to the forefront and make everyone aware of that, both patients and providers and the companies that are making the products that we're all using.
Well, the good news about that is it sounds like we have a lot to unpack here on the InStride podcast, and so we're not going to run out of things to talk about, which is great. Which kind of, Justin, we kept off on a tangent, but that kind of brings us to where you're at today in your story, man. So you brought us from your childhood to your diagnosis to how you managed it with your parents, which I think is all incredibly insightful and helpful. Especially, man, to the parents out there, God, I want to take a pause here for a second because, I was fortunate. I was diagnosed when I was 14, and so I was kind of like, my parents were in the background, but they weren't. I don't think they didn't have that stress that I think parents of young kids like you were, Justin, have, and just the stress that a parent has with a child with type 1 diabetes, where they're waking up in the middle of the night to test your blood sugar. That just hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, man, those parents out there, they're just like angels keeping their kids alive. And also how cool the technology is. Now they can just have the CGM readings, they hit their phone, and they don't have to get out of bed, and they know that their kid's good to go. So that's an amazing blessing. But also just man, the parents out there listening, and it's one of those things where I think this is something I used to think about a lot, where as the type 1 diabetic, you kind of have a sense of where you're at and that it's going to be okay. But I've seen a lot of parents who just have this immense love for their kids and they want to keep them safe. That's just what, they're on the planet to do, and they're on the outside. So it's even scarier because they're not living with it. Right. And so I thought about that when you were telling your story. I was like, oh man, so here's, Justin's parents just on the outside, just probably just super stressed. And it's easier for us as the diabetic, but man, I don't even know where I'm trying to go with this, but it's just makes me think about all those parents with little kids. It's just breaks my heart. Just the stress they have to go through. I don't think I have maybe to say it, but man, thinking about your parents.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
But yeah, coming up, through your story, your bike racing, where we're at today, and kind of still hitting the gravel scene and building this InStride platform. Anything else we need to hit on before kind of ending your story?
I think that's about it. I don't really want to say it's an end of my story, but it's to where it's at right now. We are still very much in the bike racing scene and still racing at the top level in both gravel and a little bit of road now as well. Might be dipping back into the crit scene just a little bit. Turns out the crit calendar in the US lines up pretty dang well with the gravel calendar, so there's not really any overlap. And with the way the elite gravel races have been evolving, they're getting faster, they're getting more aggressive. It's honestly closer to road racing tactics and road racing dynamics inside the bunch. And I realized this year that I need some speed in the legs. I need to get the elbows sharp again. And thankfully, the races for the race last weekend in Boise worked out super well. And I'll be going to Chicago again this weekend and probably St. Louis again in September. And I don't have any overlapping gravel races, but pretty big gravel races in between those, and all with the lead up for U.S. Gravel Nationals in September, and hopefully for the UCI World Championships in the Netherlands in October again. So still shooting for the top and trying to make diabetes as loud and present as possible there as well.
It's going to be awesome. Is the race in St. Louis the Gateway Cup?
It is, yep.
I went to school not that far from there. I used to love going to that weekend.
I have both really, really good memories and really bad memories from that race. So I want some more good ones.
Yeah, that series is awesome. But I mean, sounds like you have a pretty kick-ass calendar for the rest of the season. So that's going to be fun to keep an eye on.
Yep, it's going to be a busy rest of the year, but I'm stoked. Everything's lining up well. I've got a great bunch of sponsors and supporters behind me, and there's so many people in my life that helped me in so many ways, mentally, physically, like everything, and they've helped me in cycling, and that's all led me here to InStride, and it's exactly what I want, even if it's not something I ever could have imagined.
That's awesome, dude.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
All right. That sounds like a good spot to end it. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Alex.
For sure. Wait, we got to do blood sugar checks before we sign off.
No,
Oh, yeah.
no, not
Oh, yeah.
All right. Since I started that one, I'm at 176, slight arrow up.
I got 92 straight across.
Ooh.
The reason I said no was I'm currently 301.
Oh, dang.
So I rushed back from dinner and dessert, and such is life.
Such is life.
I was microdosing my kids' dummy blocks, taking it right up to that zone. I was gaming the system. I was like, all right, I got to come up a few grams. All right,
Worked out perfectly. You get the dub this week.
nailed it. We got to actually come up with prizes. We got to put like, I don't know, everybody's got to throw in a buck or something. There's got to be a coffee. There's got to be a coffee at stake here.
Like that. I think
I'm glad we're not starting this week then.
Alex is like next week. We'll start next week, guys.
I think of all the ones we've done, I have currently hit the record for highest blood sugar at the end of a podcast.
Dang. All right. Well,
Dude, do these things stress you out, Alex?
The podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is it from the stress, dude?
I'm sitting here. You guys can't see me on the video, just like shaking this entire time.
I thought that was
The
just
adrenaline. It's all the adrenaline getting amped up before you get on air. I like it.
I'm just so excited to talk about InStride and all these cool diabetes things that, it's an adrenaline response, really.
I get it. Nice, guys.
At least today.
All right.
cool. And we sign off
All
from
right.
there.
Adios.
See ya.
All right, guys.
Bye.
That was fun.